Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1212 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Electronic Products Recycling Association. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana, the lowest prices on cannabis. Guaranteed. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Joining me today, making his Toronto Mic debut, is Brent Bambury. Welcome, Brent.
Mike, hello. Very nice to be here and proud to be part of episode 1212.
You know what? I saved it for you, buddy.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a lucky number.
I feel like we had this in the works for a while. Like there was a little bit of like a DM tag. Is that a thing that kids are playing these days? And I'm so glad we finally put this together. Here you are, Brent Bambury in the TMDS studio.
And the only reason why this was in the works for a while was because I took a year off. And we adopted a kid.
Congratulations.
So thank you so much.
That's
so
amazing.
I'm a dad like you.
Okay, wow.
And I know that for a lot of people that's nothing special, but for me it's been really, really great. And I kind of let everything go for a little while. But you know, when the year ended, and I went back to work, I was so glad to be back to work. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I actually got back into it again. So,
like sometimes you got to step away to like appreciate what you've got going on there, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. So now I'm back and thinking about radio again in a way that I really didn't for a long time when I was off, and at the same time, kind of digging being a dad and doing the dad like things. And, you know, my kid's only 3.5 years old. So little things that he's achieving are have been really, really fun to be part of. So I've got two things going now, which is work and dadness. And I'm amazed that I'm in both of them at this age.
I mean, well, what age? You look young. You're forever young. But you don't have to give me your birth year. But where are we at here?
I'm 62.
Okay, you look great.
Yeah, thank you.
We didn't know you were getting all these compliments when you came over here.
But I mean, I'm reluctant to say that because I don't want people to think 62, you should be retired and you shouldn't be a dad. Like, I don't want people to turn against me right away with the kind of ageism that I know is rampant in our society. But yeah. No, I mean, both of those things are a blessing, and I recognize that. You're
a young dad compared to like a Mark Breslin. Right?
You had to go to Mark Breslin to find.
Well, I was thinking of people who've been over here. You know who I almost went to because he was an older dad when he had his, but he had already had kids.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring him up anyways because I'm a friend and
I know who you're going to say.
And I produce. Who am I going to say?
You're going to say Ralph Ben.
Yes, I am.
Right.
Okay. Because so I proudly produce Ralph Benmurgy's podcast. A lot of P's in that sentence. Not that kind of rabbi.
Yeah.
And I remember like literally having conversations with Ralph where he would tell me that people used to come up to him at the CBC and say, "Hi, Brent."
People thought we looked quite a lot alike, and we were in similar jobs we actually had the same job we both hosted Midday for a while.
Right.
He hosted it before I did, but he did Nightlines, which was a sister show to Brave New Waves. And we were both on the late night for a period of years as well. But Ralph was like meteoric. Like he was so generous and so kind to me. And
I was going to ask you because I feel like he's mellowed a lot. Like, I mean, he's always been, I only got to know him in the last like 6-7 years. And he's a sweetheart now. Like, he's literally my rabbi, not that kind of rabbi. But like, was he always a decent dude? I feel like he might have been a little, a little rough around the edges, maybe like a little sandpaper going on with Ralphie. How was he back then?
Not to me. He was always sweet to me and always really generous to me. But yeah, I mean, you don't get to be the host of a late night television program like Benmurgy Live without, burning with ambition. And he had that. And I think some of the people that worked with him, who I later worked with at Midday, found that it's not a Canadian thing to want that kind of, fame and bright lights.
Why didn't Friday Night with Ralph Benmergui succeed? Like, why did it only get like a year and a half? And then it is a punchline. I saw Jim Carrey was on, I think, Q with Tom Power.
Yeah.
And he made a remark about like, leave Benmergui alone, because there's still jokes about the Friday night. Like, why did that fail?
Okay, so I actually
right out of the hopper here. Okay, Brent, let's
well,
get
Ralph
this,
would know better than I do. Having done comedy in Canada, you need, in order to compete with American, you need a writer's room of 20 people, 20 brilliant people. We just do not have the kind of economy that can support that. I don't know how many writers were on that program, but I'm sure it probably, in order to compete with the other stuff that was on the air, it would need a lot. And, he probably just didn't have the support for it. But he's definitely smart and fast on his feet and fun to watch. And, I've seen him do great television.
Yes.
So he's, and as I said, he was always, he's very philosophical now, but he had that side to him then. He always had a deep side to him. And I like that very much. I don't know if he ever told you this story, but
Tell me.
So I went to Israel in 2004. And I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to go because so many news stories about Israel were intriguing to me. And I didn't feel that I could actually understand it unless I was there, unless I walked through those streets, talked to some of the people and tried to understand what it's like to be an Israeli, living the kinds, because obviously there's lots of people with interests in the conflicts that are articulated in our own news and the stories that we tell here. So anyway, I was in Israel and I landed in Tel Aviv and I was incredibly jet lagged. And I got up and I was walking along the beach and I thought, oh my God, this is a beautiful city. I'm on a Mediterranean beach. Look at these high rises. And suddenly there was this guy standing in front of me in a Toronto Maple Leafs cap, right? And he said, hi. It was Ralph. It was
That's
Ralph
amazing.
Benmergui.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was in Israel for like 3 hours or something, and there he was.
And you two guys who are mistaken for each other over here in this country, that's a random happenstance that you guys bump into each other there.
But it's amazing to me that he knew it was me. Like he looked out and said, "That's Brent Bambury walking along the beach." And
Wow.
I would have said, "Oh, look, there's a guy in a Maple Leafs cap." I guess they like that crazy team here too. But anyway, so it was him, and so we hung out a little bit in Israel. And I enjoyed it very, very much, because his perspective as a Jewish person was much different than mine. And and he was interested that I was interested in Israel. So we had this little thing in common at that time.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So what took you so long to get over here? Like, it sounds like you were custom made to be an FOTM, friend of Toronto Mike.
Well, I don't think you ever you did extend the invitation a while ago, but I think it was
It took me a while,
the pandemic,
right, to get the courage.
It took me a little. Don't say that. No, but I've also been a fan of your stuff and the people you've been talking to, and I was really pleased that you talked to Steve Paikin last week about somebody that I knew. Who was Peter Herndorf, who was incredibly influential. Like the program that Ralph and I both did, Midday, was in some ways because of Herndorf, because it was from that group of programs that he created for CBC. And Peter Herndorf's wife is the person who hired me, Eva Siegler, to host Midday eventually. And I did a lot of work with her. And then when I lived in Ottawa, I was away a lot on the weekends in Ottawa. I would leave Ottawa to go to New York or to visit people in Toronto.
Right.
And his family continued to live here while he ran the National Arts Center. And we would bump into each other on Monday mornings at the Ottawa airport. And he's always really sweet and kind, but oh my gosh, the things that he achieved.
Well, he's the kind of guy where it's not a name I knew, but he's been involved in all these things I'm like quite passionate about and trying to cover. So when I learned about his role in basically recruiting Steve Paikin from CBC to come join TVO. The nice thing about the show is now I have a Rolodex. Let me show you. No, it's not really a Rolodex, but I do have these people I can call, and they'll take my call and talk to me about people, and I can learn about people like Peter. And it was a great combo with Steve Paikin about Peter Herndorf. Yeah.
So I apologize for not picking up the phone when I was off, and not really
No,
thinking too
don't
much about
apologize for
broadcasting.
that. I love the fact that you took some time to bond with your child, and I'm excited for you to be a dad. There's no better gig in the world.
Thank
right?
you.
That's-
No, I know. And you know, there's lots of things. I mean, I want to now. I just want to show you a bunch of pictures, but I can do that later.
Well, you know, and it's, one pet peeve I have is that often people like have to say, "How old's your kid?" And you'll say 3.5, and they go, "Oh, that's a good age."
Yeah.
But what are the bad ages? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can tell you, I've got my oldest is 21, and I had
wow.
brunch with him yesterday.
Nice.
And I'm like, what a great age this is. Like, you know what I mean?
I look forward to that.
Where's
Yeah.
like so far? That's 21 for 21 in terms of ages. They've all been great.
I'm really glad to hear that because you know, so when you adopt, and I don't want to talk about my child too much, but when you adopt, you don't really know what's going to happen. You don't know if that child is going to bond with you or if it's going to be traumatic for them, you know. And in his case, he had a foster mother who absolutely loved him and adored him, which is so great. I mean, that's so great. He knew love from a really early age, so you're worried about that. Like I really did have a lot of anxiety about, what if being with us is going to be the worst thing that ever happened to him, right? Instead of the best. And so having that time, to be with him, and the fact that my employers allowed me to do that, to step away from a network program, to do that, it really was a gift. But he, in those early years, he was speech delayed. He was a pandemic kid, so he didn't really have a lot of contact with other children his age. And there were a bunch of other issues that you didn't know how they were going to resolve. There was a question about whether he might have autism or lots of things that we had to think about. But we have lots of neighbors with kids who are really, really great. And one of my neighbors who has 3 kids said to me, when they get to be 4, that's when it really clicks. And so he didn't say this was a great age, right?
Okay.
And it did make me feel like, it is going to, things are going to fall into place and get better. And that's exactly what happened. Yesterday, we put skis on him for the first time.
Wow.
And and I love to ski and snowboard. I love to snowboard. I'm not much of a skier, but and I'm looking forward so much to the day when we go out and we can just spend the day on the hill boarding and skiing our brains out. And he was amazing on skis. He did it. He just totally did it. And that kind of thing, that sense of, it's all coming together is, and I know that there are going to be bad days when you think, what am I doing and stuff like that. But it does feel like things are coming to get better and are coming together and getting better. And, and he's rolled with everything. So, everyone says, oh, my child is my hero or whatever. But I do think for an adopted kid, when you see them succeed, it's so great. It just feels so great.
Well, it's beautiful, man. Love hearing this.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Honestly. And I was going to ask you, have you ever seen this movie, The Whale?
I haven't seen The Whale.
Okay. So I won't spoil it. I won't accept this. Well, is this a spoiler? Not a spoiler because there's nothing specific except I watch a lot of movies with my wife. She's like my movie watching partner, and we watch a lot of stuff. And usually we're pretty close in what we think. Sometimes I like something more than her. Sometimes she likes things more than me. But we watched The Whale, and I was like ready to applaud the ending of this movie. Like I said, what a great movie. And she says, I hated it. Okay. So I can't remember the last time this happened when we were on completely different spectrums of a movie. So if anyone wants to come break, I don't know, we need some tiebreakers here, but I thought it was great. Well, he was amazing. Brendan Fraser was absolutely amazing. And will probably win Best Actor at those Oscars coming up. But it's funny to see a movie and have this, at the end, you're like, I react. I look over for do you agree? Do you concur? And I got the opposite reaction, which blew my mind. So that happened on the weekend.
I've heard both of those reactions to that movie. So I'm curious too, because I've heard some people really, really loved it and others didn't.
It happened in my home there. So so reach out to me and let me know who's right, me or my wife on that one. So we talked Ralph Benmurgy. I'm wearing the shirt. Didn't wear it for Ralph because he's not at the CBC anymore, but I have worn it. I'll just let you know who got to see me in the shirt. Tom Harrington.
Okay.
Do you know Tom?
Of course.
I got to ask if you know these people. From parties.
I've been there for a long time, so I
know.
A lot of people I know them.
Well, you've been there since '79, right?
79 was my first gig at CBC. Correct.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is a long time. I'm doing the math now. That's almost as old as I am. Almost. Wow, that's great. Yeah. So that's over well over 4 decades now that you've been working for the CBC. Okay, so Diana Swain.
Yes.
Didn't wear it for Dwight Drummond. Jill Deacon.
Oh yeah, for sure. Jill's great. I love Jill.
Yeah, just 1 year ago this week, I was on Here and Now with Jill Deacon because I was celebrating my 1000th episode and was chatting with her, and that popped up in my like on this day memories thing. It just popped up, and I understand she's not feeling very well these days. So I just shout out to Jill Deacon. I just hope she feels better soon.
Oh, so do I.
She came public with some symptoms. I don't know, long COVID. I don't think she called it that, but whatever it is, I hope it resolves itself.
I didn't realize that. Jill and I were both in Montreal at the same time, so we and
Bag of Hammers.
Yeah. So that Did
you ever see Bag of Hammers live?
No.
Okay.
But Montreal was a great place to be in radio. There was just such a rabid kind of small group of Anglo fans, and so it was really. It was a great place. Period, and a great kind of period in my life. And that was the first big city that I actually lived in. So
okay, because you're from St. John.
I'm from New Brunswick. Yes.
So near St. John?
No.
It is St.
Yes,
John.
born in St. John.
Okay.
St. John.
Do you know who lives there now? Maestro Fresh West lives there now.
I heard that. Is he doing something? Is he doing something related to basketball there?
I know he's on he does a radio thing. I'm just showing you my autographed copy of the 12-inch single of Let Your Backbone Slide.
Really cool.
Shout out to Maestro if he's listening. He's good at FOTM himself.
Looks great.
But he just up and moved, I think, during the pandemic. He wanted to leave the big smoke. I don't know if it was because of how expensive it is to live here. I don't know how we live here. I don't know how you live here. I don't know how anybody lives here unless you have multi-generational wealth or something. I don't know.
Which I don't.
Let me see your T4. Do you mind if I take a peek at it? Okay, so you're from New Brunswick.
Yes.
But so is that's where you start we talked about 1979, but maybe even before you start with the CBC in 1979 and you were at St. John, what is that, CBC FM in St. John. Like, did you always know you wanted to be in radio? Like, did a young Brent say, I want to talk into a microphone?
I mean, the young Brent didn't have any idea at all what he wanted to do. But I loved radio from a really early age. And radio, I didn't grow up in a CBC house. My grandmother listened to CBC, which was completely in keeping with what CBC represented then. Like, it seemed to be something that talked to people who were over the age of 70, right? That was what it felt like at the time.
Right.
But I listened to the AM radio station there that played music, and in those,
was it like top 40?
Yeah.
So it would be like 1050 Chum for St. John.
It was like that. But it wasn't in those days. It seemed like the charts were not put together by an algorithm, right? So there was a huge mix of different kinds of music, So I knew a lot of like Atlantic rhythm and blues stuff. I didn't know that they were black artists. They were just played along with Bubblegum,
right,
and Engelbert Humperdinck or whatever else was being played on the radio.
Because it was not put together by an algorithm.
Exactly.
Like there was I do a lot of CFNY episodes on this program.
Yeah.
Okay, they had a committee that would meet in a room and they would go through the new releases and stuff, and they would go big passionate pitches for we should add this and this is a new band, whatever. And these were human beings who were gathering to discuss what music would sound good on the CFNY airwaves, and that's what it was like.
And it felt human, right? It really did. It felt like this mix represented something that was bigger and outside myself. Outside, as a little kid, as a preteen, and when I got a little older, I had a cassette recorder and I used to record songs off the radio so I could listen to them on my own, and
what kind of music did you like?
I liked everything. I mean,
Everything.
I can tell you the first 7-inch single that I bought was Crimson and Clover by Tommy James and the Shondells. And one of the great things was I got to interview Tommy James, wrote a book about how the mob controlled absolutely every aspect of his musical career.
Wow.
Yeah. And so about 12 years ago, I think I interviewed Tommy James, and it is kind of amazing when you're sitting outside. I mean, Tommy James is
he did Moni Moni, right?
He did Moni Moni.
Yeah.
He did Crystal Blue Persuasion, and these are all songs that I listened to on the radio as a kid growing up, and and Crimson and Clover was this amazing song.
I think we're alone now.
Yes, that was him. That was a more poppier one. Like Crimson and Clover is a much sort of.
No, I'm just thinking because they were all covered, right? Like because we got Billy Idol brought us all Moni Moni, people my age or whatever, and Tiffany
did. I think
brought us. I think we're alone now.
And Dragging the Line.
Ooh.
Yeah, just really really amazing stuff. So I think that was the first 7-inch single I bought. But then I remember also getting Nancy Sinatra, like These Boots Are Made for Walking, and and actually I think that the song that by her that I loved was Jackson, which she did with
I'm going to Jackson. That one.
Yeah, I'm
I've
going to
heard of
mess
Johnny Cash
around.
and,
yeah. And she did that with Lee Hazelwood.
Right.
So all of this stuff was extremely important to me, and other kids were watching TV. And I was much more interested in. I remember sitting in the kitchen where the radio was and listening to the radio and recording these songs. And later in life, like when I was probably in high school, for some reason, I started listening to CBC. And there were a couple of things. I had a neighbor who listened to it. My grandmother, as I mentioned, listened to it. And, it seemed it just seemed insane how old fashioned it sounded. A friend of mine at the time said, everybody sounds like they're bored on this station. Right? and there's a Conan O'Brien joke where he says, NPR, where they read the news as though there's a baby sleeping in the next room. And that's what it sounds like. But CBC just, it seemed goofy to me in places and seemed extremely old fashioned. And then there were these hip radio programs, like at the time, As It Happens with Barbara Frum and Alan Maitland, which was funny and kind of it had a sort of attitude to it. And
here, quick aside, I'm going to do a few asides and then we'll get right back. But when I had this idea for the podcast about 12 years ago, because I was helping Humble and Fred with their podcast, and I said, I think I can do that, like leave my comfort zone talking to a microphone. I knew I wanted like an original theme song right off the top, and I went to my buddy, rapper, producer, Ill Vibe, so shout out to Illy, and I said, I want like a hip-hop version of the As It Happens theme. Oh. Like that's literally my instructions I gave him. I said, the dun 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 dun. So you got, and then, so he went away, anyways. You heard it at the beginning, but what I got as which I've used for every episode of the 1212, 1112 there, 1,212, right? Okay, got to get the math right there. But basically,
it's
what you hear
there, a Rush album.
Yes, 2121, right? We're getting there. 2112. Yeah,
the dyslexic Rush album.
But I got so that's the hip hop version you hear at the beginning of this is Ill Vibe rapping over some beats that are like a hip hop version of As It Happens. Okay, back to you, Barbara Frum.
Well, so there had been what they called the radio revolution that happened. It's kind of unclear when it actually began on CBC, but so there were some programs that would pop out, CBC radio was still really interested in kind of rural Canada. It had this idea, there used to be this show called Voice of the Pioneers, where they would actually talk to people who had settled the West. And, that wasn't that long ago. That was like 1920. They were living in sod houses, and that kind of thing. And so they were remembering that, and they would have been in their 60s or 70s. They're all gone now. And so all this stuff is there. It's been recorded, right? But at the time on the radio, I was like, are you serious? People want to listen to this? But then you realize you start to learn things while you're listening to the radio. And that seemed huge to me. I remember taking notes when I was listening to shows on the radio. And I heard a documentary at the time, As It Happens, changed their format, but they used to do documentaries in the final hour of As It Happens. And I remember hearing a documentary about Love Canal, which I'd never heard of before. And this was a toxic waste dump that they built housing on top of near Niagara Falls, right? And just, being so emotional, listening to what happened to these people and the kind of injustice of it all. And it was it was extraordinary to me that I could get this sitting in my kitchen chair, doing my homework. Right. And so I became interested in CBC, but I also still thought it was sort of a weird kind of goofy place. It felt out of step with the time mostly, So I aspired to the programming that really interested me, and I also felt that maybe we could move some of the other programming into the present in a way, the way that young people think. Why do they sound like old fogies or whatever? And haven't they ever heard of contemporary music and that kind of thing? I think that you have to have a little bit of you have to have a little bit of that irascibility to try to figure you could change something. And I did think that I could go in there and change things.
So did you just find out they were looking for a reporter at CBD FM? Is
CBD? Yeah. Well, and it wasn't FM then; it was all AM. Still, it was. It was.
Sounds like a cannabis station. CBD FM.
Yeah, exactly right. I think
Shout out to Canna Cabana.
You want some CBD oil? No, I listened to that in 1979. But yeah, They had a morning show and they had a sports guy, and the sports guy was leaving. So I went in.
Do you remember the names of these at all? Do you remember the name of the sports guy? No.
I don't remember the name of the sports guy, and I should because I kind of went to high school with him. But I certainly remember all of the other people because I never worked with him. But.
Yeah, name check. I know. I feel like there's some underlying code amongst Canadians that it's rude to name drop, and I'm always shaking it out of people because it's like I love the name drop. Like drop names like it's raining.
I was on a morning show with George Jordan, who was a broadcaster from Halifax, who was great, like an amazing private radio guy who in his later in his career switched over to CBC. He was amazing. And with Leslie Hughes, also known as Molly Hughes, who was more of a CBC type. And she was amazing. They were both like strong broadcasters.
Wow.
And so this was a morning show, 6 to 9. They were extremely competitive. So you were in the middle of these two powerhouses, right? And there I was like trying to squeak out sports scores, while I was sitting between them. And I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I could do this. Like you just said about yourself. I could do this, but I was way in over my head. Just reading sports scores. I was
You must have been so young because I just did the math. 1979.
I was 19.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, and it was just a summer job. I was in university. And so I did this for a summer. And I know I must have been awful at the beginning, but it didn't really matter. The station was new. The show was new. It used to be that all of the broadcasting came from Fredericton. They created a station in St. John, and this was the first iteration of their morning show. I think that's how they were able to get such talented people. The producer was Havoc Franklin, who still works at CBC, and he was the person who hired me. Wow. So yeah, you should talk to Havoc. Get Havoc in.
Dude, introduce me. I'll make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. He's great. But it was a real education, and I didn't think I was that good at it, and I didn't think that I was going to return to it, to be honest. But I couldn't let it go. After I left and went back to school, I thought about it a lot. And then I said, you know what, maybe I can actually do some, maybe I could do an item for the morning show. I was in university in Halifax at the time. Maybe I could do an item for the morning show there, and I started kind of working as a freelancer. And then I ended up doing freelance sports as a, fill-in host and fill-in sportscaster and that kind of stuff. And, it was all kind of like accidental. But I started working continually in summer jobs with CBC as I was going to university, and then that continued through grad school, and then around 1983, 82, I was working with a woman named Sofia Hatzapetros, and she was brought in to be part of this team to start an overnight show for CBC, because CBC realized around, the early 80s, hey, we don't have anything that speaks to young people, like they did, because they had these hit programs that I talked about. But like I said, they tended to favor kind of rural over urban. They tended to favor, like if you listen to This Country in the Morning, later Morningside, which was one of their flagship shows, it always kind of tracked towards the rural audience and rural characters, with the exception, Michael Enright did it one year from Toronto, and he was more of a kind of in the Letterman mold before Letterman, before Letterman was known. It was a little bit more kind of ironic, and it had an edge to it, and it definitely had an urban sound. I loved that season with Enright, but that was widely thought to have been a failure. Enright himself told me that he failed at it, and I've always said to him, no, you're great. I can actually quote things that you said on the air that summer. So I knew about the creation of the overnight youth-oriented radio before it ever went to air. And I was involved with the people who were creating it, and I was a huge fan of Augusta Lepay, who was the first host of Brave New Waves.
I have a clip.
Yeah.
All right. This is day one of Brave.
Oh my God.
New Waves.
I should tell you right away that you're probably listening to the only show on CBC, stereo or AM, that features dim lights, a bar, and a producer in a tuxedo. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the people who run this fair corporation for us all, for giving 4 bright, talented, and interesting people a chance to do something in the nighttime. We're going to be playing you a lot of music on Brave New Waves, what's loosely termed, I guess, new music. Some of it you would probably be familiar with, some may be new to you because it doesn't get a lot of airplay, or because the group or the artist just hasn't made it, as they say, in the North American market yet. We're also looking forward to getting as much Canadian material on the air as we can so that we can let people in Winnipeg and Calgary know what's going on in Halifax, so that we can let people in Toronto know what's going on in Vancouver and all the towns and places in between, too. Brave New Waves is going to be with you 5 nights a week, 6 hours live a night. That means when real big bloopers happen, you have the enjoyment of knowing they're live. And we certainly encourage you to take part in, how shall I say it, our evolution. Feel free to write us. Tell us what you like about it, what you don't like about the program, what you'd like to hear, the music that you'd like to hear, maybe something that's going on in your neck of the woods that you think we should know about, that we can spread the word around to the rest of the country. We're at Box 6000 in Montreal. Very simple. There is a postal code if you want that. It's H3C388, and we encourage strange letters.
Wow. Okay, that's the first episode of Brave New Waves. What year is that? Approximately
1983, I think. Yeah, I think it's February 83.
So at this point, you're just a fan? You're a listener? Or are you...
I was in the studio for that night. I was in the control room, I think, that night.
Okay, she shouts out like the 4 people or whatever.
Yeah, so that's the staff. I wasn't working on the show.
Okay,
I was I was going to university. I was a grad student at McGill at that time.
My daughter goes to McGill.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
McGill's great. I had so much fun there. And so I was living in Montreal. And a couple nights before that, they did some dry runs, and I was a guest on one of the dry runs. So I was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know you were there for the day one.
Yeah, and I knew the 4 bright people that were putting together this show. I worshipped Augusta Lepay. Like, I thought she was the greatest broadcaster, and that voice, just listening to it now, and her dryness, her sense of humor, her ability to laugh at herself, inviting people to insult her. She's a powerhouse. She was a powerhouse, and I definitely when I followed her on that show, and I definitely modeled, certainly for the first year or so that I was on that show, I tried to just do everything in Augusta's voice. That was the template for me.
So you're going to McGill, and you're essentially like a correspondent, I suppose, for Brave New Waves at the beginning?
No, I was still doing freelance for other programs. So I was still I still would get gigs in the East, fill in. I was filling in. I remember I got a job in Moncton once for part of one summer, and I would stay up and listen to Brave New Waves while I was there. That's how I felt connected to the culture,
Right.
And that was really powerful. There was music that I would hear on Brave New Waves that I knew I wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. And so I was probably still recording it. I was probably still recording stuff off of Brave New Waves to listen to when I was driving around in the CBC vehicle to talk to lobster fishermen. That was the kind of life that I was living. I remember getting up really early one morning when I was working in Moncton to interview Steve Fonyo, who was running across the country that summer, and listening to the last hour of Brave New Waves as it petered out and dawn broke, and just that there was something about that time and about the way that program made you feel connected to something that was, I don't want to use the word alternative, but it was an alternative to whatever mundane thing you were doing.
I have, a number of FOTMs who reached out when they heard you were coming on.
Oh.
and so I'm going to read you a few notes here about Brave New Waves and what it meant to other people.
Thanks.
You mentioned Steve Fonyo.
Yeah.
So I just want to tell people the documentary that fellow FOTM Alan Zweig made on Steve Fonyo.
Alan's an old dad too.
You know what? Yeah. And I think I dropped the same references on him I did when I think of old dads. I'm like, well, there's Breslin, there's Ben Murgy,
Yeah.
I was thinking, am I an old dad? I have a 6-year-old still, but I guess that's not that old. But
That's a good spread, though. 6 and 21.
Yeah, that is a good spread, right?
Like,
so I always say, when I'm with my 21-year-old and my McGill going daughter who's 18, and this is actually reading week this week right now we're in, so she's actually in town.
Oh, nice.
But when I'm with them, always when I was with them, I was the young dad, because I was 27 when James was born, and I was kind of the young dad, and there would be 40-year-old dads, and there's me in my 20s or whatever. But now I'm the older dad, you know what I mean? So I can kind of play both roles depending which kid I'm fathering at the time. Okay, so I'm going to play, here's a question, and then I am going to play a clip. I want to, because you take over Brave New Waves in 1985, right?
Yes.
Okay, look at you. Okay, amazing. Okay, so Andrew Ward writes in, he goes, can you ask Brent if he knew of or listened to CFNY 102.1 when he was living in the Maritimes or in Montreal. I always wonder, now he's asking about like who freelanced on the show because of the shoestring budget. But were you aware of, or were you at all listening to like what David Marsden was doing on CFNY?
No. There was no way to listen to that stuff. This is pre-internet, right? There was just no way.
You'd have to phone somebody. The long distance bills were so exorbitant. You'd be,
and if I came to Toronto, I wouldn't listen to the radio when I was here, and I probably should have. I was probably aware. So I was more aware of what was happening in campus radio than what was happening sort of in CFNY.
Right.
And I was really interested in what was happening in campus radio because I knew that some of it was really good, and I heard some of it. I could hear some of it because I lived in Montreal where we could hear it. And so I knew some of it was extremely rudimentary, but I always felt like Brave New Waves could aspire to be the best of campus radio.
Yeah.
And that was, and a lot of people who are in campus radio were like, you get paid for what you do and we're doing it for free. And I was like, good. It's great that you care that much about it. And there were absolutely people who were doing it that were better than we were. But no, I didn't know that. And, I didn't know much about CFNY at all. And I probably knew that I did know that some of the stuff that we played, the more commercial music that we played, the major label stuff was getting airplay in certainly in Toronto and probably in certain other cities too. But a lot of, I honestly, I didn't listen to it. I wasn't influenced by it or anything like that.
So nobody was like sending you cassette tapes and saying,
well, people sent us cassette tapes of their music and we would play
it. Like here's, I don't know, this show on CFNY. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, he also, Andrew Ward, who I've met at a few TMLX events. He's a good guy. He wanted to know if I was going to wear the shirt. And Andrew, I'm wearing the shirt.
Wearing the shirt. Yeah.
You'll see it in the photo. I'll brave the cold by posing in this short sleeve shirt for that photo with Brent. He did want to know. He just wanted you to know he considered Brave New Waves radio gold on a shoestring budget. So I don't know what the budget was like, but he seemed to think it was shoestring. Do you think that's fair from?
Okay, so by CBC standards, it absolutely was shoestring, because we were on a network. And we had to pay union wages to technicians,
Right.
So it probably had a bigger budget than you could imagine, and probably a bigger budget than a lot of shows have now. I don't know, but compared to other shows at that time, absolutely, it was very, very shoestringy, And we worked really hard. We did, as Augusta said at the beginning, we did 30 hours live a week, overnight, and you have to fill that time, but it was supposed to sound like it was being done kind of live by people you knew, maybe in someone's basement. I mean, that was part of the appeal.
Well, this is now Brave New Waves. It's called Toronto Mic'd. And okay. Speaking of CFNY, speaking of all-night shows, FOTM Danny Elwell heard you were coming on, and Danny, of course, had the alternative bedtime hour on CFNY, and she just wrote "nice" with an exclamation mark.
You,
so
Danny. Thank you.
Danny's
really nice.
She's another great radio personality. John Moore, morning show host at the Mighty 1010, says that he is very nice. So John thinks that you, Brent, are very nice. That's a quote.
John's great, and John interviewed me. I have a cassette. I still have a video cassette of an interview that John did with me as host of Brave New Waves. I don't know when that would have been. It was when we were still doing the show overnight, so probably sometime in the 80s. John's younger than I am, but I really enjoy listening to John on 1010 now. And it's just it's great that I still bump into him. I still see him, and John's just so great. He's so fast.
Maureen Holloway, who's a very good friend of John Moore's, Maureen says, "Say hi for me, will you?"
Oh, so now I work with Maureen. So I got canned by CBC. I got let go.
What year is that?
That was 90. That was 2000, in the year 2000.
How dare they?
It was very weird. So I just turned 40, and then they were like, "Hey, okay, out the door." And I've been working there every day since I was 25.
Yeah.
And I did a program on what was then Life Network, where I was a film reviewer. So that's maybe why you wanted to ask me about The Whale. And Maureen worked on that show. And so I actually worked with Maureen. And then now I see her on billboards and stuff. So she's having a great career too. And I really
she's a podcaster now.
Yeah.
She's a podcaster now. She got Yeah, she had a good run, though. Good run. Q107, then CHFI. She left Q for CHFI. She took over for Aaron Davis.
Right.
Talking about radio royalty here. And she had a very good run, and she did quite well. So, and she's a good FOTM herself. There's a photo I have, speaking of kids, like when I think my youngest, I mentioned, is 6 now, but when she was like 1 year old, there's a photo of like Maureen Holloway holding 1-year-old Morgan in her hands for our official photo.
Great.
And it's
That's
like, I can
great.
always time check things with that. So Connie says, I picked up so much great music from Brave New Waves. That's it. Just wanted you to know.
So, Connie, that's really great. And I understand that because I did too. And we did have a pretty good, I don't even know how to describe it. We were plugged in to British music that as it came out, and we had a pretty good pipeline to new music as it was released, even when it was super independent. So we would get lots of, at the time, 7-inch singles. And I know I don't have to explain what that is to some people, but we would get the latest stuff from Britain as it came out, and then we would be plugged into the American hardcore and punk scene and stuff too. And it was all analog at the time, at the beginning. We started getting CDs as well. But what was also analog was our information gathering. There wasn't even a fax machine when the show went on the air. We used to get British newspapers and the British music press, and we would literally cut up the articles and put them in files. So there was a Cocteau Twins file, and here's an interview from the NME from 1983 and that kind of stuff. And, that was how we kept track of stuff. We used to do profiles of artists, and that was how we had, some information, because you couldn't go online and look them up.
Well, there's no Wikipedia.
There was no Wikipedia, but there wasn't even a fax machine. Like, you
Right.
couldn't even get their latest press release.
Wow.
So it was, it was definitely an analog process. But I get people coming up to me. I've had a lot of different jobs in broadcasting. I've been really lucky, and I'm still working. But people who come up to me that want to talk to me usually want to tell me how much it meant to them to feel connected to that world in their bedroom or in their apartment, as they were studying to be doctors, or sometimes when they were, in architecture school in their studios, working all night on a project or on a model, or just, when their mom thought they were in bed asleep.
Right.
And feeling that they had music that spoke to them, or that there was a culture out there that spoke to them. And I know how powerful that is. And, I was just a conduit to that. I liked being there. I loved that culture myself, and felt that I had an affinity for it. But I do understand how important that show was to people, and how it connected them. And, and it went on for another 10 years after I left in 95, and it went on for another more than 10 years with Patty Schmidt hosting. And I really admire what Patty brought to it, because I think then the show ceased to be analog, and then there was an internet culture and electronic music culture that she was plugged into in a way that I wasn't. I don't think I could have done it as it continued, and it remained relevant, and it remained important to people, and it remained on the outside of the mainstream, which is, a weirder prospect when culture gets fragmented the way it did by the internet, and there was no longer a monoculture that you could kind of push against.
Right.
Everybody had their own little thing, and that show continued to, then in its second or third decade, it continued to matter to people, and that was, I think, really that was Patty that was able to do that.
Well, Brent, I have more notes for you. So before we get to Patty there, we have Dr. Gregory Clages, who actually is an FOTM. He came on and we did a deep dive into the sort of the mysterious death of Tommy Thompson.
Oh, yeah.
It was really quite an episode, and he's written a book about that, and quite a story, of course. Every Canadian should know the story of Tom Thompson. But he writes, and this speaks to exactly what you were just saying, Brent. He says, as a 1980s rural Ontario teen, Brave New Waves was cool music 101, my static-laced late-night conduit to music I still treasure today. It was where I first heard Swans, Lloyd Cole, Jim Thirlwell's Flotus Projects, Fetus. British spelling, okay. Green on Red, etc. He has got fond memories and gratitude. So that's from Dr. Gregory Clages.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. I'm sorry that you didn't have a better signal wherever you were, because one of the great things about the show was if you and I didn't have the money for this, but if you had a nice stereo system, oh my God, it sounded amazing, right? Like we were broadcasting in stereo and on this network, on this giant network, and it sounded terrific if you had what we called a really expensive receiver and some good speakers, or even headphones. Yeah, and Jim Thirlwell, I interviewed Jim Thirlwell on the show. I interviewed Michael Gira of Swans on the show. I got to talk to a lot of these people. I interviewed Lloyd Cole. I got to talk to a lot of these people too, which was also kind of cool. And I remember at one point, reading a rave review in the New York Times of this novel, and I said we should talk to this guy. And the next week we had him on, and so we were able to connect to that world, I learned a lot about interviewing there. I'm sure I did some terrible interviews too, and I apologize for that because we didn't have any resources. Did you ever have an interview go south on you? Oh yeah, very, very.
Is there one that sticks out, like
one of the
greatest misses?
You learn tricks about how to handle interviews that don't go well, and if you haven't learned those tricks, you're really you're going to get hung out. And we did an interview, and I'm not going to say his name because he's no longer with us. But he came on, and I think he was quite heavily drugged at the time. And I just didn't know how to deal with him or handling him at all. I didn't think that he was really present for most of it, but at the end he said something that made me think that he actually was present through all of it. So I don't know, but that was one. There's always. Is
there anyone that you can name? Like, is there one that you could just name the guest? Maybe they just weren't in a talking mood.
I interviewed, I loved New Order, and I interviewed Peter Hook one time. And I didn't think Peter Hook was all that fun to talk to, and I didn't think it made for a very good interview.
Well, sometimes you're a dentist, right? You're pulling teeth. That's no fun.
Yeah, there's that, and sometimes I think sometimes they don't like you, and they don't want to have to spend time with you.
Why did you agree to have this conversation? Why are you here?
The interviews that of course the ones that are always the greatest ones are the ones that you don't have any expectations for, and they turn out to be wonderful, and the person's warm and kind and everything.
Okay, do you want to shout out a couple of those before I get back to these notes that people left for you? Some interesting names coming up too.
Okay, so we had the Jazz Butcher used to be on the show a lot. He was Pat Fish, who was kind of a funny guy. I really liked talking to him. We had Laurie Anderson on the program many times, and she was identified with the aesthetic of the show in a lot of ways, and so that was really great. Diamanda Gallis. I just saw someone, and there was a story in the New York Times this week about Yoko Ono turning 90. And one of the stories they told was that she came to a Diamanda Gallis show, and afterwards Diamanda, who was not afraid of anything, wept when she embraced Yoko Ono. And I remember Diamanda Gallis being one of the people that I asked if I could hug her after the interview. I met her in studio, and she was just so towering and great. And so, there's so many of them, and I know that after I leave, I'll think about a dozen. This is a long time ago.
You got to leave something for a sequel here.
Yeah, I'll come back anytime. But this is a long time ago.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah,
I did that with Rod Black actually. Rod Black was guest for 800. Not as cool as 1212, but 800. And we were like, there was so much to cover. We did 90 minutes, so much. And I had so much more I wanted to. I said, hey, can we do it again tomorrow? And he said, sure. We did next day. We did 801 together. Nice. So 801. Brother Bill, who was a personality on 102.1 CFY, and his real name, by the way, Neil Morrison. He was also on the air at CFox in Vancouver. And this is fun for all the listeners for the first time ever, because Brother Bill's been on this show many, many times, but always remotely because he lives in White Rock. Oh, wow. But Brother Bill is in my calendar for his first ever in-person appearance. He's going to be here at the end of May. So finally, I've actually never met Brother Bill, which is hard to believe because he's a good buddy. But Brother Bill writes, when I first started doing overnights at 102.1, I would listen to Brave New Waves on my days off for new music to bring it to our airwaves. Brent and his staff at CBC introduced me to so much. So there's evidence. No, I'm asking, were you listening to CFNY? What's going on there? We now have evidence. CFNY is listening to you guys to hear what they could be bringing to the airwaves here at 102.1.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the stuff that kind of got pushed our way was so obscure in some ways, right? And some of it probably didn't warrant being played anywhere else, but we played it. We put it on. And I'm glad that we were able to help Bill with the show. Yeah.
Well, here's an artist and a musician that and he's been over here, and I think he's amazing. Ian Blurton. Ian writes, Brent and the whole Brave New Waves crew were incredible to Change of Heart and helped music communities across Canada come closer together. That's Ian from Change of Heart.
I want to take my hat off right now because I think Ian is one of the greatest songwriters and producers. And Change of Heart did a session with Brave New Waves that was just amazing. So yeah, I love that band, and I love that time. The kind of music that they were making was representative of that time, and in the best possible way. And so thank you, Ian. Thank you.
There's a band that once I get down the rabbit hole of Change of Heart, I can spend weeks just listening to Change of Heart. And in a lot of these songs you do recognize, like they're, radio hits, whatever, at 102.1 or whatever. But then you're like this band is so great with so many like hook-laden, great rocky, like that great 90s CanCon alt scene that we had here in Canada. And you wonder, how is it that Change of Heart wasn't bigger? Like there's a bunch of bands like that jump to mind. Like I'm still trying to figure out how was Hootie and the Blowfish bigger than Rusty?
Right.
But okay.
I know.
And Hootie Blowfish is fine. Darius Rucker is a great singer, but I don't know how those things work. I mean, it's some of it's political. There's so much stuff at play, but yeah,
and some of it is chance.
Yeah.
But the physicality of Change of Heart's music was the thing. And I was just, it was so full of adrenaline for me. And then at the same time, this great craft behind it. So,
speaking of craft, I'm going to send you home with some fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery.
That's so kind of you. Thank you.
Local craft brewery here. You can find them in LCBOs and grocery stores across this fine province. So shout out to Great Lakes Beer. GLB. And while I'm giving you stuff here, I'm going to give you a lasagna, frozen lasagna from Palma Pasta.
Oh, wow.
Delicious. You're going to love it. It's in my freezer right now.
Daddy's bringing home the lasagna tonight.
Lasagna and beer. What more do you want for your visits? Delicious. You're going to let me know when you cook this up. But just delicious. And thank you, Palma Pasta. They have 4 locations. 3 are in Mississauga. 1's in Oakville. Ridley Funeral Home has sent over measuring tape for you, Brent. So measure what you wish.
Oh, wait. So I thought this is for my box, right?
Your casket.
Yeah. Good.
You got to make sure, if you pre-order a casket from Ridley, you got to make sure you're going to fit. So that's your measuring tape. Enjoy.
Man, thank you.
Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. They've been great supporters of this podcast forever. I already shouted out Canna Cabana, but they will not be undersold on cannabis or cannabis accessories. You go to cannacabana.com to find a location near you. And one last shout out is to EPRA. They have a website called recyclemyelectronics.ca. And I'm sure there's people listening right now that have old technology, maybe that's in your basement or piled up, like stuff that doesn't work or is antiquated and obsolete, but you don't want to throw that into the garbage because the chemicals and everything in that technology is very bad. You don't want it to end up in the landfills, but if you go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, you'll see an EPRA approved site to drop it off, and they will safely recycle all the parts of that tech. And I want to thank EPRA for doing that. All right. Paul Dearborn writes in, I just heard him. That's you, Brent, not me. I've never been heard on the radio, although I was a year ago this week. I was on
you're in Jill's show.
Jill's show. I just heard him on the radio this morning, and now I see this. It was a tweet from me saying you're coming on. Late night memories of listening to Brave New Waves are flooding back. As a young teen discovering great new music, there were a few ways to do that. CFNY was one way. Prowling through cool record stores was one.
Yep.
And staying up very late to listen to Brave New Waves was another. It definitely inspired my short-lived college radio career.
Nice. I wonder where he was. That's Paul, right? I wonder whether
Paul Dearborn.
I wonder where you were on the air, Paul.
Let us know, Paul.
Yeah, let us know.
What's the name of the station at McGill?
It was called Radio McGill, I think, when I used to listen to it.
Okay. Now it has it's a terrestrial station?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the call letters are?
No, I don't. Okay. I wouldn't know. So they went terrestrial while I lived there. I think that they were a closed circuit station
right.
for a while. Yeah. And same thing when I was at Dal, I did my undergraduate at Dalhousie University, and CKDU, I think was the name of the Dalhousie's station, but they were only in-house. But then they acquired a license later after I'd left Halifax.
Cool. Real Neo, say that 5 times fast. Real Neo says, can you please ask Brent Bambury if he sent Lou Reed the 2 packs of Buckingham Smokes after their telephone convo? This is regarding Ulrich, what is it? Mayus, is that how you say it? Mayus? I never know how to say that name, but discussing performance of Metal Machine.
That's right.
Metal Machine music.
Okay, so I've interviewed Lou Reed twice.
Okay.
I think twice. And the first time was a television interview for Midday, and I was terrified because I just thought he was just gonna take one look at me and chew me up and spit me out.
Right.
And he was actually quite sweet. He was actually he tried to be a little bit kind of hard-edged, and that he kind of came around. And then the next time I talked to him was when we had a cellist named Ulrich, and I think it is Mice, the last name, on Go, which was the sort of comedy performance show that we did. Right. And Ulrich had done a transcription for string quartet of Lou Reed's Metal Machine music, and so it was played.
And this is that Distortion album, right?
Yeah.
This is
yeah. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know whether it's a real. Oh, I'm going to sound
if it's a work or a shoot.
Yeah, I don't know what Reed was up to with that record, and I know that probably there's a lot of music heads out there going, no, it's absolutely a work of that's a composition,
Right, it's art.
Yeah, and others because I actually said to Lou, some people say that this record was just your contract obligation record.
Many say that
for RCA.
Yeah,
and I think Lou said, people say a lot of things. I think Lou said something like that. But we did an interview with Lou for when Ulrich was on the show, and he immediately said yes, he would do it because he respected Ulrich so much.
Okay, because Real Neo says that this is one of the great unresolved cliffhangers of his life, is knowing whether you ever sent Lou the 2 packs of Buckingham Smokes.
I don't recall.
Probably didn't. Right?
No, I don't recall.
I will say, as a host of a podcast, lots of promises are made on this podcast that never actually happen.
Well, I'm
still
waiting
waiting
for
my
lasagna.
Shoot. That's happening. Okay. That's happening, Brent.
Well, but first of all, I wouldn't have wanted to do anything that would have hastened Reed's death. But and as far as I know, both he and Laurie Anderson smoked to the end of their lives. Laurie's still probably out there smoking. I remember Laurie Anderson did a piece about, she test drove the Mazda Miata when it first came out.
Right.
And one of the things that she said, and I always remember this because I had a sports car once too. And she said, what I loved about this car is that you can open the door and you're low enough that you can stub your cigarette out on the pavement. And, but no, the answer
Probably
is no.
not.
I didn't send Reed, I didn't send Lou any cigarettes. And I guess I must have felt that he didn't really think that he was going to get them, because I would not have wanted to do anything to cross Lou Reed.
Do you know who was with Lou Reed in the final days of his life when he was dying?
Well,
probably multiple people, but one person, because I had a very long conversation with him about it on this very program, is current Bare Naked Ladies keyboardist Kevin Hearn.
Oh yeah,
who was also in The Look People with James B.
Oh wow,
so right there.
Wow.
Isn't that a small world story?
That is
In fact, it was quite a conversation. Actually, we did 2 parts to this thing too, but the second part, which was all about Gord Downie, because Kevin Hearn was there with Gord Downie also. And Kevin spoke about how being there for Lou Reed helped prepare Kevin Hearn for how to be there for Gord Downie.
So what was Kevin's connection with Lou? What was it, a Buddhist thing? I
don't think it was a Buddhist thing. I feel like Kevin was somehow playing with him as a musician, and got to know him as a musician, playing with him, I think. But so Kevin Hearn, talk softly and carry a big stick. That guy's been there for many a great musician in their most vulnerable moments.
I think about Lou a lot because I love the records he made at the end of his life, and I love the records, of course, that he made with the Velvets and the first solo records I really, really enjoyed as well. But then, there's the records that people didn't like very much, like New Sensations and stuff. And I liked those records too. Sure. So, I do think that he was, look, it doesn't matter, but he's Lou Reed. So, but I always thought that there was a lot of brilliance there. And then his persona was so irascible and so incredible that, this character that he created, that he embodied,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, David Ryder, who was my guest, so he was head of the team at the Toronto Star that broke the story about John Tory having an inappropriate relationship with a City Hall staffer.
Yeah.
This was big news.
Yeah. Well done. Well done.
So that story breaks on the Friday.
Yeah.
About an hour before John Tory announces he's going to resign. And then the very next morning, David Ryder came on Toronto Mike, so I could pepper him of all the questions we have. Like, when did you find out? When did John Tory know you were working on it? All these things. This note comes from that very David Ryder. He says, "Hey, Mike, suggested questions from me." He goes, "When I moved to Brandon, Manitoba from Toronto for my first job, I was horrified to realize the college radio station didn't broadcast beyond campus." So that would be the closed circuit thing we were talking about there earlier. "With no CFNY or CKLN to listen to, staying up late to hear Brave New Waves was my pre-internet lifeline to new music from bands like Voivod."
Yes.
Shout out to Ben Rayner, loves his Voivod.
Yeah.
Voivod, Flesh for Lulu, or Swans.
Yeah.
Did you realize at the time how much of a vital service you were providing for people in smaller centers, or only after the show ended? Also, how sleepy a lot of people were at work because of you. Dave Ryder.
I did know, because we got, you heard Augusta from the very first program saying, send us mail. And we got what we called snail mail. And I don't think the term snail mail.
No, it would just be mail.
Yet. It was just mail. We got lots of mail from lots of people all over North America, because the signal leaked into the northern United States too. We had lots of listeners in Michigan. And for a while, we were actually heard in Philadelphia through a deal with NPR. So we were broadcast on WXPN in Philadelphia for a long time. But yeah,
because the idea was that you were going to get a U.S. syndication deal from NPR, and I guess that never happened.
I honestly don't know.
Okay, yeah.
I just know that there was a special deal that we did with XPN. And
I understood, though. I want to hear if it's true that it was the deal, that the reason that you didn't work out was you guys weren't censoring objectionable lyrics.
That's true. You can't do that in the United States. You can get sued and lose your license and everything if you say drop the F-bomb, right? But or something much milder than that. But I just want to say, it's really interesting to me that David Ryder was into such heavy music as Swans, Voivod, and Flesh for Lulu. Like I don't know what I thought he would listen to. But
his favorite band of all time. Here's a real fun story. So I actually am friends with David Ryder's brother-in-law. Okay. So when David Ryder, who made his, by the way, he's the last in-person guest before the pandemic hit in March 2020, because I had to move it out of the basement for a while, as you might remember.
You're outdoors, right?
I did get it outdoors, but it took a little, before I had to move it remote, and then I moved it outdoors, because I hate the remotes. Like, you're here in my basement now, we're connecting, there's an energy palpable, I can feel it. Like I can feel this energy. We do this on Zoom, and a month later I'm like, did I ever have Brent Bambury on the show?
Right.
Like it's literally like that. Yeah. But okay, so David Ryder, last guest, it was actually the Friday the 13th of March 2020. He's here. I said to my to Chris Brown, his brother-in-law, and I said, hey, Chris, what's his favorite music? I'm going to play it for him. He goes, yeah, he loves the Beastie Boys. So I had some Beastie Boys loaded up, okay? But this is Friday the 13th of 2020. So there's lots of news about how we might be all sent into isolation. They said, you might have to go into isolation. And this was the big talk. I didn't even shake his hand because I'm like, I don't know what the rules are anymore. So I decided I'm going to play Joy Division's Isolation. I play that just because we're about to go into isolation. But I have Beastie Boys loaded up because Chris Brown has told me that's David Ryder's favorite band of all time. I play Isolation from Joy Division. He looks at me, David Ryder, and he's like, how did you know that's my favorite band of all time? Joy Division. Not Beastie Boys. He goes, he shows me his phone, the desktop of the screensaver thing on his phone is Joy Division. He says that's his favorite band of all time. So just complete coincidence, I ended up playing his favorite song, even though Joy Division is not Beastie Boys. There you go. So that happened on Friday the 13th.
I'm just two things. First of all, I'm imagining that he calls John Tory's office and says, "We have the story. We're going to run with it. Could you please ask the mayor if he'd like to make a statement before we publish?"
Yes, that did happen. Yes,
and they say to him, "We'll get back to you."
Well, it was more specific questions. It was like, here are specific questions for John Tory, and it went through his lawyers, like John Tory's lawyers, I should say. But it started 8 days out with a more of a generic, like, do you have any comment on this allegation or whatever? And then like the day before, like the Thursday, so it drops on the Friday night, but the Thursday, the questions from the Toronto Star to John Tory that John Tory's lawyer, were very specific questions, a series of specific questions. And we all know what John did next, which was basically the press conference on the Friday night.
Right. But I'm imagining that David Ryder said, so will you get back to me? And they say, yes, we'll get back to you. And he says, you better. I listened to Voivod. But it is amazing that the Toronto Star took on the last two mayors of Toronto and sort of ended their mayoralty in each case, right? I mean, it's kind of the power of journalism is in this city is really strong. And there's lots of things that people complain about Toronto, and there's lots of things that don't work, right? But this is something that we should be proud of, and David Ryder and his team did amazing work.
Absolutely. One last
wait, I have one more thing.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Because I want to talk about Joy Division. Because,
Joy Division, yes.
Joy Division, and
you were talking about Peter Hook earlier.
I talked about Peter Hook earlier, and of course, Peter Hook and New Order have split. They've parted ways now. But I was in Cincinnati. Wait, where's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Cleveland.
Cleveland. I was in Cleveland.
Cleveland rocks. Ian Hunter, I think.
And I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it didn't seem like it was going to be my thing,
Right.
And I went in and there was some like costumes that David Bowie wore, and I thought, oh, cool, good, And there were some ticket stubs, and for bands that I respected and stuff. I wasn't feeling emotional or anything like that, right? And then I walked into a room and there was a piece of paper in a lucite cube, and I went over there and it was a piece of foolscap paper, like lined paper, and on ballpoint ink, written on that paper were the words "To love will tear us apart."
Wow.
And Ian Curtis's handwriting.
Right.
And I just stood there and shook. Like, honestly, it just felt being in the room with that icon, and that little piece of history was just really, really extremely moving to me. And it again, it's the connection with the music, and I felt that connection to that piece of music, and I guess to Ian's life and struggle too, and the whole story there.
Well, the Garys had Joy Division booked for the Edge, like that was booked. There's tickets were sold.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Obviously, a tour that never happened because Ian took his own life. I think on the eve of that.
That's right.
Departure.
Just as they were about to leave. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So Brian K. I want to shout out because Brian K. wrote in that he listened to you every night and he loved Brave New Waves. But there's a million people who love Brave New Waves, but I'm sure you've heard all that. But I want to ask you about a couple of names of people who've been over that have connections to Brave New Waves.
Sure.
Jim Shedden. Do you know the name Jim Shedden?
I do, but you have to refresh.
Okay, so right now, Jim Shedden now works at the Art Gallery of Ontario. He's curating content. I should know more, except that Jim Shedden had an involvement with Brave New Waves, but it could have very well been after you left. You departed in 95?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here's a gentleman I believe overlaps with you, but you'll let me know in a second. You overlap with Michael Barclay?
Michael was there a little later.
Okay.
But Michael wrote about Brave New Waves and Nightlines in his book. I think it's called Have Not Been the Same.
Yep.
And I thought wrote really well about what it meant for Canadian music at the time. And Michael continues to be. I don't think I've ever met Michael. But he continues to feed me through his social media feeds.
Yeah.
Information about stuff that's happening, and he's connected to the world that Brave New Waves represented.
Absolutely.
In a contemporary way. So I have a lot of respect for Michael.
He wrote a sequel to that book, Hearts of Fire.
Yes.
But he skipped 5 years, and then he did a decade. So it's like 2005 to 2015. Anyway, it's great too, though. All these books, Michael Barclay's books are all great.
Yeah, and I've heard great things about Hearts of Fire as well.
Let's listen to a little bit. So we heard the very first episode of Brave New Waves, but let's just a little random clip here. I won't play it all, but I'll just give us a taste, and then I'll bring it down. This is actually from 1987.
That Petrol Emotion from Derry, Ireland, and Spin Cycle from the LP Babel, which is brand new from that Petrol Emotion. Good album, too. It's produced by Rolly Moseman of the Swans, and Petrol Emotion are politically correct post-punkers, members of the Undertones formerly, and they claim they still retain a lot of the indie spirit which guided them after being a top 10 punk band in the Undertones. Before that, we heard Echo and the Bunnymen from Liverpool, and Lips Like Sugar, promising cut from the upcoming LP called Echo and the Bunnymen. Hasn't been released yet. And you'll know it when it is released because it will be played everywhere. You won't get you'll be able to get more than enough of Echo and the Bunnymen when that LP comes out. I promise you. In fact, it'll be so popular we won't play it anymore in this program. Have you noticed that? If something gets too popular, we just don't play it here. It's sort of this policy we have. Like, all of us on this program listen to Prince. I mean, I hate to tell you this. I have to break it to you now. We all listen to Prince, but it's CBC policy never to admit that you listen to Prince. I know, it's a crazy policy, isn't it? But I mean, this is what we work under. Our bosses are in Toronto. We're here. We just sort of get the guidelines handed down the pipe. And if you don't like it, you can take a taxi to Toronto and talk to our bosses. Ask for Keith Duncan and tell them that you want to talk about Prince. Okay, tomorrow night on Brave New Waves, we are profiling X from Los Angeles, who have a new LP out. Tonight, we're going to be listening to the music of Kid Creole and the Coconuts.
There we go. A little bit of 1987.
Oh my gosh, what was I on that night?
I loved it. Like, to me, it's just like your buddy talking to you about music and spinning some jams for you.
But it's true, we never played Prince on Brave New Ways, and we all loved Prince. I don't know if it's true that we wouldn't. I mean, I do believe we played Lips Like Sugar many, many times after that time. But I'm amazed that would have been the first time that it had been played. Probably we just got the single. It probably was one of the first time. To me, that's a classic song now. But that was when it was brand new. Amazing. So yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of times you leave Brave New Waves. I almost call it Brave New World. Brave New Waves in 1995, and that's to go and do Midday.
Right. It was a real 180 turn for me because I went from, the alternative overnight show to like the noon hour mainstream kind of show. But to me, that it made sense because I was, like, as I said to you, I always loved CBC, and I liked the kind of, I liked the eclecticism of CBC, and I felt that Midday had that aspect to it, and it still had a little bit of an edge because Ralph had been there, and and so I was spent 5 years on television every day, and it was definitely an odd time for me. I was still pretty young.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a lot of TV experience, but now I was doing a television program every day that ended up going live. It wasn't live at the beginning, but and it was definitely fun, and it was also my introduction to Toronto. I never lived here, so I was 35. I moved to Toronto, and that was the beginning of my Toronto years.
Right.
And I really loved it. I was pretty happy in those days, and it seemed like a pretty good gig. So yeah. But a lot of people thought it was odd that I would leave the alternative show for something that was so mainstream.
Right. Well, and then it's 2000 when Midday ends its run, and as you mentioned, that's when you leave the CBC for a bit.
Yeah, that's right. I got cast out into the wilderness for a while.
They couldn't find something else for Brent Bambury to do.
Well, I think it was up to me, to find something, and I don't really think that I never really felt that I've been I was never somebody's project, like I kind of charted my own course. I didn't really feel that I had ins with management or anything like that. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I've been doing TV. I'd done radio for a long time. I didn't feel like I would necessarily wanted to go back to, I was older to go back to something that felt like youth music. I felt like it would be a little bit of a fraudulent thing to do at that age. After 5 years of TV, I would have been 40. And so I didn't think that I wanted to pursue that, even though I was still kind of connected to it. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up doing a little bit more TV with Life, and then
Flick.
Yes, that's right. I did the program.
And with the right
Flick.
font, it looks like fuck. Flick. Okay, so that was your Life Network movie reviewing. I'm sure that was unintentional, though. You edgy Life Network people.
I have one word to describe this movie. Just look at the title of our program. And I did that for a while, and then that ended, and and a daily program came up in Ottawa, and I really felt that doing a daily current affairs show in Ottawa was going to be interesting, and I wanted a change in scene. but just as I was getting ready to do that, I met up with these two guys, David Carroll and Kai Black, these two producers from CBC, and they said, we want to do a game show. And so we did a game show on for the radio as a summer project, and it was called Off the Cuff, and it was a strange kind of amorphous, ruleless game show.
Right.
But Bob Ray was on it, and and we just had a bunch of different people come on, and they were playing these kind of games that were sort of made up on the fly. And it ended up being really fun, and it was kind of a comedy show because anything could happen. And we did it before a live audience, and it was just a different kind of vibe. And that ended up continuing for a while. And then we did another game show called Groove Shinny, which was a musical game show, and I loved doing Groove Shinny. That ended up being quite popular. And all of this ended up kind of coalescing into Go, which was a Saturday morning program, which we eventually did live, again, in front of a live audience. Comedy based, but also, there used to be a television show called, it wasn't To Tell the Truth. But where they would bring people on, and then they would surprise people with Truth or Consequences, right? And it was kind of like Truth or Consequences in that we would play these elaborate games that we created. It was an indescribable show, as you can tell. I'm not able to really kind of distill what it was, and it lasted for a long time.
Yeah.
And it kind of worked on Saturday morning, but it really wasn't something that could be exported. And at the end of the run of that show, I remember that the head of CBC programming at the time said, I can't sell this to somebody. I can't. At the time, we were big on exporting programs through PRX to American market or
Right.
podcasts or whatever. It was getting to that phase, but no one. You couldn't even describe what it was. And I remember what a line that was written by either David or Kai at one point, which was something like, "Is it a game show? Is it a talk show? Nobody knows." And it was true. We didn't know ourselves. So it was experimental, and it did put me into a live situation. You had to be fast. I did script stuff as well. I wrote scripts. I wrote a lot of comedy stuff. I wrote jokes. Tried to understand the rhythm of comedy and how it worked and stuff. And it's definitely. It speaks to the eclecticism of the stuff that I've done. It's probably the reason. I mean, the kind of weirdly eclectic career that I've had so far probably speaks to. I mean, I would. It is not the career path of someone who knows what they want to do. Right? It's the career path of a dilettante, and that I guess that I've embraced that, and that's kind of maybe been the secret to why I've had some longevity. But I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Like I wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, follow my path." Right? It doesn't make any
boring,
sense.
right?
It wasn't boring. And I've never been in a situation where, and I know other people who have, where you go into a studio and you think, "Oh my God, this show's a pile of crap," right? I've never felt that. I've never felt that, And when I was doing the Daily Show in Ottawa, which was a drive show, it was the drive radio show in Ottawa.
All in a day.
Every day we went in there, I thought, this is a really good show that we're about to do. And I always felt proud about that. And of course, sometimes you do a show and you think, wow, that really sucked because it didn't work out.
Oh, sure. It can fall flat. Sure.
It can fall flat. But I never went in there thinking that. I always went in there thinking, oh, we're going to do something really good. And so that's been great. And it continues to be the thing that makes me happy to
Okay, so let's get you to current day here.
Yeah.
So basically Go gets you back to Toronto, right? Because you leave Ottawa, come back to Toronto here because you're doing Go. And then post Go, how do we get you to day 6? What's between Go and day 6?
So there wasn't really anything between Go and day 6. So day 6 continues in Go's slot on Saturday morning,
right?
And Saturday morning is a great time for CBC Radio. We have a huge, relatively large pool of listeners at the time. And so I've sat there now. I've been in that slot for many, many years. I can't remember when Go first went on the air, so I can't tell you when. and so when
2002.
2002. So yeah, so 20. I've been in that slot for over 20 years, which is
Wow.
crazy. And it went like that, like it really did. But yeah, when we realized, so one thing about Go is that this, when we talked about Ralph Benmergie's show earlier, and I was saying you need writers, right? And so we were, this was not even a program that had a format that was the same every week. Like we were reinventing the show every freaking week.
Right.
And it was a lot to ask of the 2 or 3 people that wrote the show. So at the end of it, we were all tired and done, you know? And the head of radio programming at the time said, so I think probably we should end it, you know? And he, as he said, he couldn't sell it to anyone. He couldn't get other people, other markets into it because he couldn't even describe it, you know? So I worked with a bunch of really talented people on a pilot for what I would like to do in its place. And I tried to imagine something that was a little bit more kind of user-friendly. And that's how we came up with Day 6. And, you know, we had a really great team that we did 2 pilots, and both of them I think were really pretty good pilots. And then the show went to air, and my team was so great that it sounded terrific from the beginning.
Yeah.
And the team's changed a lot because it's been on the air now for over 10 years.
Yeah.
But you know, it's heard on PRX stations. They were able to sell it, you know, and it's continued to do really well. But as I said, radio audiences, the numbers are, you know, after the pandemic, people's days have changed. They don't take public transit anymore. They don't, you know, they don't go to the office. They don't come home in cars, or they don't, you know, and so we're at a crossroads right now in terms of audiences for terrestrial radio. And so I don't know what the next 5 years are going to be like, you know, but I don't know. I don't know what the future of radio is going to be like.
Would you ever want to retire, or no?
You know, it's funny. I don't see that. Like when I took a year off, I thought, well, let's see how this feels. And as I said to you, I was so glad to be back. Right. I really liked being back on
You're re-energized.
I'm re-energized, and I like doing the show, and I like being connected to, you know, the question of what it is, what's happening today, and what does it mean, you know? And so all of those things continue to stimulate me. And I like radio. I like being on the radio, but I don't know what the future. For years now, for decades, they've been saying, okay, terrestrial radio is doomed. It's not going to last, you know, and yet there's quite a lot of evidence that we're not there yet. But I think we could be. But one of the things about the pandemic and the way that things change so quickly and people's lives change so quickly is that I think we could be there sooner rather than later, but maybe not. You know, maybe things will change in another way that we can't anticipate. I don't know.
Here's a little clip just to hear. This is the late, great Norm Macdonald, and he's on Day 6 with some guy named Brent Bambury.
Norm Macdonald. He's anchored SNL's Weekend Update. He's roasted Bill Clinton and Bob Saget, and nobody can mumble their way through a lame joke like Norm can. Check him out at last year's Comedy Central roast of his friend and comedian Bob Saget. Norm Macdonald at the Bob Saget roast. The Canadian comedian stops by Richmond, BC tonight for a stand-up set, so Day 6 thought we'd say hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent. I'm great.
You're doing stand-up tonight in Richmond, BC. If you bomb, will your fans riot?
Yeah, they'll all riot, except 2 of them will start kissing each other.
It's timely at the time.
Hockey's obviously it's been a really crazy summer for hockey, and earlier this week, Sidney Crosby announced that he's recovering from his concussion, but we have no idea when he's going to play again. Have you been following the Sidney Crosby story at all?
Yeah, it's pretty depressing. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of concussive stories, which is bizarre that it just came out of nowhere like that, because hockey when I was a kid was way rougher.
Did you ever take a hit on the ice?
Oh, yeah. Because when we were kids, because I'm real old, I'm 47, so when I was a kid, the Philadelphia Flyers were crazy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
As a matter of fact, I met Dave the Hammer Schultz when I was a little boy outside of Montreal Forum. and went out behind there, and there was the bus. It was like Slapshot, you know.
Right.
And he had a big fur coat on and stuff. And I went over to Schulte, and I wanted a autograph, you know. And the Hammer, he just looked at me and he threw a cigarette at me.
You didn't get an autograph at all?
No, I didn't. I was real sad as a kid, and then later on, I was happy because it was much funner that he threw a cigarette at me.
Listen, I can listen to this whole thing, man, but it's a little taste of day 6.
What an amazing storyteller!
Yeah, he's the
and
best.
timing, just brilliant. This is not my observation, but the thing about Norm that was so great was that it didn't really seem like he gave up. F-U-C.
Yeah.
It was just.
Well, you can swear on the show. This isn't the CBC.
Okay, well, it didn't seem like and he didn't play by anybody else's rules but his own, and I love that about him. He's so great.
So, is there a particular guest you've had on any of your programs, really, like that you were almost speechless because I can't believe I'm talking to this person?
Yeah, Patti Smith.
Yeah,
I love Patti Smith, and yeah, I mean, kind of like shaking with appreciation for being close to her, you know. And she also,
that was an in-person interview?
No,
Okay.
that was a phone call. And during the phone call, the line dropped. Like we were having this conversation, the line dropped, and I was like, "What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" And then the phone rang. It was her. She called us back, right?
Nice.
Yeah. And I don't even remember what we talked about. It wasn't that long ago. This was on day 6.
Yeah.
You know, but when Joe Weider died, the Canadian weightlifting guru, right? When Joe Weider died, we called Arnold Schwarzenegger's office and said, "Would the governor talk to us?" And they said just a second, and they said, "Yeah, when do you want to talk?" You know.
Wow.
So he came on and talked about Joe Weider, and it's just one of those things where it was something that he was passionate about. Probably nobody else asked him. And he wanted to say what Joe Weider meant to him, and he was great. He told funny stories, and you know, it's hard not to be starstruck by that, you know. And when I was on Flick, I interviewed a lot of movie stars, right? But usually on those circumstances are that you're interviewing them about a project, and whether it's a good movie or a bad movie, you have to talk to them like you're enthusiastic about it. But here was Arnold Schwarzenegger he wanted to talk about something that had mattered to him in his life. And that was great. And that's that connection, right? That's when you think, oh, this is going to be amazing because it's touching somebody, you know? And so it's great.
And I can only imagine that just CBC would open some doors, like Toronto Mike on the line, Mr. Schwarzenegger, do you want to talk? And he's like, you know, like, who's this guy
I don't
or whatever.
know if that's true. Like,
you know?
I think if you find the thing that they're passionate about and you can get that message to them, you know. So we try it and we don't get anywhere. When let me see if I can remember this. It was just like 2 weeks ago. So let me see if I can put it together. But okay, so I wanted to talk to Elvis Costello about Burt Bacharach when Burt Bacharach died.
Yes.
You know, but we couldn't get and I was sure that Elvis would talk to us if we could get the message to him, you know, and I don't think it was because we're CBC. I think it's because he cared so deeply about Burt Bacharach. And that didn't come through. And, you know, when you're doing a show, as you know, like, you lots of stuff doesn't work out. Like for everything you hear that makes it to air, there's 4 or 5 story ideas that didn't get that far, and some of them get pursued quite far, you know. But we weren't able to get Elvis, and I was just really disappointed. I thought it would have been.
But were you
great.
able to get to Elvis? Because it's the gatekeepers that, especially when you get to a status of Elvis Costello. Like, I was able. So Chuck D. I did an in-person with Chuck D, which was like my Patti Smith there. It's Chuck D, oh my goodness. But I was able to get directly to Chuck. Like, I didn't have to go through gatekeepers. I was able to directly connect to Chuck, told him what I was about, what I wanted to do, and he said, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like, I got to Chuck. If you had got to Elvis, he probably would have said, yeah, I'll do it.
I think he would have, but I don't think it's because we're in CBC. I think it's because it was something that I know that he was passionate about, you know? And I think it would have been great. I just think it would have been great to hear him talk about
for sure.
Burt, you know? But just another story. So when I lived in Ottawa, it was the last years that the radio stations were in the Chateau Laurier. So we had a studio up under the copper eaves with gargoyles outside of it, right? And it was amazing going to work every day because I went to work in a friggin' castle, and I lived downtown in Ottawa, which at the time was not something that people did. More people live in downtown now than when I lived there 20 years ago. So I'd walk to work in a snowstorm, and then suddenly this castle would come out of loom up out of the snow, and there were these guys that worked at the front door that Fairmount hired in these giant fur hats, and they'd open the door for me and say, "Good morning, Mr. Bambury." Right? Like,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So that was how my days began. But the great thing about being there was that if anybody was playing at the Arts Center, they were staying there generally because right across the street. Right. So you could get on the elevator and Elvis Costello would be standing there, right? Which that didn't happen to me. That happened to my buddy Pierre Millet.
Wow.
But so every day there was this possibility that something cool was going to happen.
Remember, he did marry a Canadian.
He
so
did.
We have a connection here.
Dana Kroll.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brent, this has been amazing for me. Awesome. I don't want you to be like on your way home thinking, oh, I wanted to say this or I wanted to share this story. So this is just your opportunity before Lowest of the Low play us out here. Is there anything you don't want to live to regret? I didn't tell this. Oh, I was on Toronto Mike, then I forgot to mention that. Anything at all in the that you drained there?
The only thing that I want to say is just that, just talking about the decades of work that I've been doing. There's so many people who are so kind to me. And and many of them were people that I worked directly with, and many of them are people that just were good to me along the way. And the people who want to talk about Brave New Waves remain the people who make me think that there was an effect to the stuff that I did,
right.
Because this feels, you do these things and they're gone, right? You create content and poof, it's gone, right? And so I do.
Especially radio, so of the moment.
Yes.
Like I got to know yesterday. Oh, I just heard Molly Johnson on your show. Like it was happening. Like it's like that's sort of a different phenomenon than in radio, which is as it happens, and then it's in the abyss.
And then and I really do appreciate that people want to tell me that it mattered to them. It's like me standing in front of Ian Curtis's words. I don't want to compare myself to Ian Curtis, but it's the experience, it's the connection that they have with the music or whatever was the experience that we put on that night, and where they were in their lives, and the fact that they want to tell me about that they want to bring that back and say that it meant something to them means a lot to me. And so the people that reached out to you through your program today and you reaching out to me is just a great. It's a lovely part of doing this kind of work. So that's all.
Well, from Ian Curtis to Ian Blurden, there you go.
Yeah,
a lot of people loved what you brought to them. That intimacy of radio. I grew up loving radio, and I remember having my blue transistor radio, under my pillow. And if I wasn't listening to, Tom and Jerry bringing me Blue Jays games, I was just surfing the dial. And I still remember, oh my God, this station's in Cleveland. Like it felt like magic that I was pulling down the signal from Cleveland.
Yeah, we get Boston in the East Coast.
Still a mind blow to me. Yeah. Always loved radio, and I loved this conversation, Brent. You got to come back. Congrats again on parenthood.
Thank you.
You're gonna have a blast, man.
Thank you. Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,212th show. 1212. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. I love Brent's Twitter handle because it's not Rex Murphy. Not Rex Murphy. I think a couple people are like, oh, Rex Murphy's coming on. No, it's not Rex Murphy. Okay. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta's at Palma Pasta. I'm going to get your lasagna right now. Recycle My Electronics are at EPRA_Canada. And Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. Listen to Brad Jones' excellent podcast, Life's Undertaking. I get to co-host that. And Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _. See you all tomorrow.
That's true because I play this guitar just the best that I can.